The mahogany table gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the council chambers. Councilman Richard Miller, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with a sneer, sat at the head, his gaze sweeping across the assembled faces. He adjusted his expensive tie, a small, almost imperceptible gesture that spoke volumes about his self-importance. Before him sat Reverend Elijah Jackson, a man whose gentle eyes held a quiet strength that belied the weariness etched into his lines. Beside him sat Sister Clara, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, a silent prayer playing on her lips. They represented Grace Community Church, and their faces were a mixture of hope and apprehension. This was the moment they'd been dreading. The moment Councilman Miller would decide the fate of their annual charity fundraiser, Hope Blooms, an event that fed the hungry, clothed the needy, and brought a flicker of joy to the faces of the less fortunate in their community. For weeks, they had meticulously prepared their application, detailing their budget, their plans, and their anticipated impact. They had even included glowing testimonials from past beneficiaries. Yet, a deep-seated unease had lingered in the air, a premonition fueled by Miller's well-known reputation for his thinly veiled racism and disdain for the predominantly black congregation of Grace Community Church. Miller tapped a manicured fingernail against the polished surface of the table, the sound echoing in the hushed room. He cleared his throat, the sound sharp and brittle. "Reverend Jackson, Sister Clara," he began, his voice dripping with a condescending politeness that was far more offensive than outright hostility. "I've reviewed your application for the Hope Blooms fundraiser." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air, savoring the anticipation. Reverend Jackson leaned forward, his posture radiating quiet dignity. "Councilman Miller, we eagerly await your decision. This event is vital to our community." Miller smirked, a cruel twist of his lips. "Vital, you say? Let's see. Your application is lacking. The budget is, shall we say, ambitious. And the proposed location, well, it's not exactly ideal." Sister Clara spoke up, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "Councilman, we've addressed all concerns raised by the city planning department. The location is perfectly suitable, and we've secured all necessary permits." Miller waved a dismissive hand. "Permits? Details, details. The fact remains," he continued, his voice hardening, "that this event is simply not in the best interests of our city. The demographics are concerning. We need to ensure that city resources are allocated wisely to projects that benefit everyone, not just select groups." His words hung in the air, a thinly veiled slur, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Reverend Jackson's eyes narrowed, but he maintained his composure. "Councilman, with all due respect, your statement is deeply offensive. Hope Blooms benefits the entire community, regardless of race or background. We provide food, clothing, and support to anyone in need." Miller leaned back in his chair, a smug expression spreading across his face. "Regardless of your intentions, Reverend, I'm afraid I must deny your application for a permit and funding. The City Council has other priorities. Priorities that benefit the entire community, not just certain segments." He emphasized the last phrase, his voice dripping with disdain. Sister Clara gasped, her eyes welling up with tears. Reverend Jackson, however, remained calm, his face a mask of controlled anger. He stood up, his tall frame towering over the councilman. "Councilman Miller," he said, his voice low and steady, "your decision is a blatant act of discrimination. We will not stand for this injustice. We will appeal this decision, and we will fight for our community." Miller simply smiled, a cruel, triumphant smile that sent a chill down their spines. He had delivered his blow, and he knew it would resonate far beyond the confines of that council chamber. The denial of their permit and funding was not just a bureaucratic decision. It was a declaration of war, a blatant act of prejudice against a community that deserved better. The fight had just begun. The air in the Grace Community Church Fellowship Hall hung heavy with a mixture of disappointment and defiance. The news of Councilman Miller's decision had spread like wildfire, leaving a bitter taste in the mouths of the congregation. But amidst the sadness, a quiet resolve had taken root, a stubborn refusal to let Miller's prejudice extinguish the flame of hope they had kindled. Reverend Jackson, his face etched with a mixture of anger and determination, stood before his flock. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice resonating with quiet strength. "Councilman Miller may have denied us our permit and funding, but he has not denied us our purpose. He has not denied us our faith. He has not denied us our community." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembled members. They had poured their hearts and souls into planting Hope Blooms, and the thought of abandoning their efforts was unthinkable. This wasn't just a fundraiser. It was a testament to their faith, their resilience, and their commitment to serving those in need. Sister Clara, her eyes still red-rimmed from the council meeting, stepped forward. "We can't let him win, Reverend. We have to find a way." The words sparked a flurry of activity. Ideas, initially hesitant and tentative, began to flow. Someone suggested approaching local businesses for sponsorship. Another proposed using the church's own grounds, bypassing the need for a city permit. Others offered to donate their time and resources, their voices filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The initial despair gave way to a collaborative energy. The church hall buzzed with activity as members organized themselves into smaller groups, each tackling a specific task. One group focused on securing alternative venues, contacting community centers and private landowners. Another group worked on revising their budget, seeking out potential sponsors and donors. A third group focused on outreach, contacting local media outlets and community leaders to share their story and garner support. The atmosphere shifted from one of dejection to one of empowered action. The initial setback had inadvertently strengthened their resolve, forging a deeper bond among the congregation. They were no longer just a church. They were a movement, a force to be reckoned with. Reverend Jackson, observing the fervent activity, felt a surge of pride. He had always known his congregation possessed remarkable strength and resilience, but witnessing their unified response to adversity was truly inspiring. He understood that Councilman Miller's actions, while deeply hurtful, had inadvertently galvanized the community, fostering a sense of unity and purpose that transcended the initial disappointment. As the meeting drew to a close, a sense of cautious optimism filled the hall. The path ahead was uncertain, but they were united in their determination to overcome the obstacles placed before them. They would not be silenced. They would not be deterred. They would find a way to make Hope Blooms a reality, proving that even the most determined acts of prejudice could not extinguish the flame of hope and compassion. The fight for their community, and for the less fortunate, had only just begun, and they were ready. The story of Councilman Miller's discriminatory actions against Grace Community Church didn't stay confined within the walls of the council chambers. Word spread rapidly, fueled by a mixture of outrage and solidarity. The initial shock gave way to a wave of public support, a testament to the deep-seated sense of justice within the community. The local news outlets, initially hesitant to delve into what they perceived as a local political squabble, quickly realized the gravity of the situation. The blatant racism displayed by Councilman Miller was too blatant to ignore. Reporters began to investigate, interviewing members of the church, gathering evidence, and piecing together the full story. The first article, published in the local newspaper, the City Chronicle, painted a stark picture of injustice. It detailed Councilman Miller's history of racially charged comments and actions, highlighting the hypocrisy of his claim that the church's fundraiser was not in the best interests of the city. The article included quotes from Reverend Jackson and Sister Clara, emphasizing the church's commitment to serving the entire community, regardless of race or background. The article sparked a firestorm of online comments, most expressing outrage at Miller's actions. Social media platforms buzzed with discussions. Hashtags like #HopeBlooms and #StandWithGraceChurch trending nationally. People from across the country expressed their support for the church, sharing the story and amplifying the call for justice. Local television stations followed suit, airing segments that highlighted the injustice and the community's response. One news anchor, visibly moved by the story, stated that Miller's actions were a disgrace and a stain on the city's reputation. The reports included interviews with community members who had benefited from the church's charitable work, sharing heartfelt testimonials that showcased the positive impact of the Hope Blooms fundraiser. The outpouring of support was not limited to words. Local businesses, initially hesitant due to fear of political backlash, began offering their assistance. Restaurants pledged to donate food for the event. Event planners offered their services pro bono. Local musicians volunteered to perform. The community rallied around Grace Community Church, demonstrating a powerful display of unity and solidarity. The support extended beyond the immediate community. National civil rights organizations took notice, issuing statements condemning Miller's actions and offering their support to the church. Donations poured in from across the country, exceeding their initial fundraising goal. The initial setback had inadvertently transformed into a powerful movement, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unwavering commitment to justice. Councilman Miller, initially smug in his belief that he could silence the church with his discriminatory actions, found himself facing a backlash far greater than he had anticipated. The community he sought to control had risen up against him, united in their opposition to his prejudice and their unwavering support for Grace Community Church. His actions, intended to suppress, had instead ignited a flame of resistance that threatened to consume him. The day began like any other, the air thick with the anticipation of the approaching storm. Dark, ominous clouds gathered overhead, casting long shadows across the city. The wind, initially a gentle whisper, began to howl, rattling windows and sending leaves swirling in frenzied dances. The sky, a bruised purple, hinted at the tempest brewing. By late afternoon, the storm hit with full force. Rain lashed down in sheets, transforming streets into raging rivers. The wind, now a ferocious beast, tore through the city, uprooting trees and snapping power lines. The city, usually vibrant and bustling, was plunged into darkness as power outages cascaded across the region. The storm's fury was indiscriminate, its wrath felt by rich and poor alike. But its impact was felt differently by those who had already faced adversity. For the residents of the city's less fortunate neighborhoods, the storm represented yet another layer of hardship, a cruel twist of fate that added to their existing struggles. Councilman Miller, oblivious to the growing chaos, was driving home from a political fundraiser. He was preoccupied with the backlash he was receiving over his treatment of Grace Community Church, his anger simmering beneath the surface. The storm, however, was about to offer him a stark lesson in humility. As he navigated the increasingly treacherous roads, the heavy rain reduced visibility to near zero. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the air, followed by a sickening thud. Miller's car, its engine sputtering and wheezing, had broken down in the middle of a flooded street. He tried to restart the engine, but it was no use. The car was dead, stranded in the heart of the storm. Panic began to set in as the rain poured down, soaking him to the bone. He was alone, vulnerable, and utterly helpless. The storm, a force of nature beyond his control, had stripped him of his arrogance and self-importance. The wind howled around him, a mournful symphony that mirrored his growing despair. He tried a cell phone, but the storm had knocked out the network, leaving him completely isolated. The luxury of his car, usually a symbol of his power and status, had become a cage, trapping him in the midst of the tempest. As the rain continued to fall and the wind howled with increasing ferocity, Miller found himself facing the full force of the storm, both literally and metaphorically. The storm mirrored the turmoil within him, the consequences of his actions catching up to him. He had underestimated the power of community, the strength of faith, and the resilience of those he had sought to marginalize. The storm, in its brutal indifference, was about to teach him a harsh but necessary lesson. He was no longer in control. He was at the mercy of the elements, and his fate, for the moment, was uncertain. The rain hammered against the roof of his car, a relentless percussion that mirrored the frantic beating of his heart. Councilman Richard Miller huddled in his seat, the luxury leather doing little to combat the biting cold that seeped into his bones. His expensive suit, usually a symbol of his power and status, was now clinging to him like a damp shroud, offering no protection against the elements. He tried everything. He jiggled the ignition, checked the fuses, even attempted a pathetic push start, his soaked shoes sinking into the muddy water that had gathered around his vehicle. Nothing worked. His car, a symbol of his success, was now a useless metal coffin, trapping him in the heart of the storm. The initial panic had given way to a chilling sense of vulnerability. He was alone, utterly at the mercy of the storm. The wind howled around him, a menacing symphony that underscored his helplessness. He was no longer the powerful councilman, the man who dictated policy and controlled the flow of city funds. He was just a man, exposed and vulnerable, battling the forces of nature. His cell phone, usually a lifeline to his power network, was useless. The storm had knocked out the network, leaving him completely isolated. The city lights, usually a reassuring presence, were extinguished, swallowed by the darkness of the night. He was surrounded by the unrelenting roar of the storm, a cacophony of wind and rain that seemed to mock his predicament. He tried again to contact someone, his fingers numb and clumsy. Each failed attempt chipped away at his composure, the veneer of self-assuredness cracking under the pressure. He was alone, exposed, and utterly terrified. The storm, he realized, was not merely a physical phenomenon. It was a metaphor for the chaos that had overtaken his life. His recent actions, his discriminatory treatment of Grace Community Church, loomed large in his mind. The backlash he had faced, the public condemnation, the feeling of being stripped of his power, it all seemed to coalesce in this moment of utter vulnerability. The storm, in its relentless fury, mirrored the storm within him, the consequences of his choices catching up to him. He had always believed in his own invincibility, his position shielding him from the consequences of his actions. But here, stranded in the middle of a raging storm, he was forced to confront his own mortality, his own insignificance in the face of nature's power. The storm had stripped him bare, exposing the arrogance and prejudice that had fueled his actions. He shivered, not just from the cold, but from a deeper, more profound chill that settled in his bones. The storm was not just a physical ordeal. It was a test, a crucible that was forging a change within him. He was no longer in control. He was at the mercy of the elements, and his fate, for the moment, hung precariously in the balance. The storm raged on, mirroring the turmoil within his soul, a tempest that threatened to wash away everything he had ever believed in. The rain continued its relentless assault, each drop a tiny hammer blow against his already battered spirit. Councilman Richard Miller, soaked to the bone and shivering uncontrollably, stumbled through the storm-lashed streets. His expensive suit, once a symbol of his authority, was now a sodden weight, clinging to him like a second skin. He was utterly lost, his sense of direction obliterated by the wind and rain. His initial panic had subsided, replaced by a gnawing desperation. He knew he couldn't stay in the car. Hypothermia was a real threat, and the rising floodwaters were already creeping towards his vehicle. He had to find shelter, and quickly. He trudged through the storm, his vision blurred by the rain, his body aching with exhaustion. The wind buffeted him, pushing him this way and that, making each step a struggle. He was a broken man, both physically and emotionally, reduced to a shivering, vulnerable creature at the mercy of the elements. Through the driving rain, he saw a faint glow in the distance, a beacon of light in the overwhelming darkness. As he drew closer, he recognized the familiar silhouette of Grace Community Church, its steeple piercing the stormy sky like a defiant finger pointing towards heaven. The irony wasn't lost on him. This was the very church he had wronged, the institution he had sought to silence with his discriminatory actions. He had denied them a permit and funding for their annual charity fundraiser, a decision fueled by his prejudice and arrogance. Now, he was seeking refuge within its walls, a desperate plea for help from the very people he had sought to harm. A wave of shame washed over him, a bitter tide that threatened to drown him in remorse. He had underestimated the power of faith, the strength of community, and the resilience of those he had sought to marginalize. He had believed himself to be above such things, shielded by his position and privilege. But the storm had stripped him bare, exposing his vulnerability and his profound error in judgment. He hesitated for a moment, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. Should he even approach the church? Would they welcome him, given his recent actions? The thought of facing their judgment, their righteous anger, was almost unbearable. But the storm raged on, its fury unrelenting. He had no other choice. He had to seek shelter, regardless of the consequences. He pushed open the heavy church doors, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent sanctuary. The warmth that greeted him was not just physical. It was a balm to his wounded soul. He had sought refuge from the storm, but he had also stumbled into a place of unexpected grace. The church, in its quiet dignity, offered him a sanctuary far beyond the protection from the elements. It offered him a chance at redemption. The warmth that enveloped Councilman Richard Miller as he stepped inside Grace Community Church was a stark contrast to the biting cold of the storm raging outside. He stood there, dripping wet and shivering, feeling utterly out of place in the tranquil sanctuary. The air was filled with the comforting scent of incense and the quiet murmur of prayers. He expected anger, condemnation, perhaps even outright rejection. He had, after all, just denied the church the funding and permit for their annual charity fundraiser, a decision born out of his own prejudice and arrogance. He deserved their wrath, their scorn. Instead, he was met with a surprising kindness. A young woman, her face etched with concern, rushed towards him, offering a warm towel and a steaming mug of hot chocolate. Others followed, their expressions a mixture of compassion and quiet curiosity. There was no judgment in their eyes, only a genuine concern for his well-being. Reverend Jackson, his face etched with a familiar mixture of strength and gentleness, approached him. "Councilman Miller," he said, his voice calm and steady, "you're soaked to the bone. Come, let's get you out of those wet clothes." Miller, speechless, could only nod. He felt a wave of shame wash over him, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. He had expected hostility, but he was met with an unexpected compassion that left him utterly disarmed. He was led to a small room, where he was given dry clothes and a warm blanket. The clothes were simple, but they were clean and comfortable, a stark contrast to his own expensive, now ruined suit. He sat there, wrapped in the warmth of the blanket, feeling the tension slowly ebbing away from his body. Soon, a plate of steaming food was brought to him, a hearty stew, fragrant and comforting. He ate slowly, savoring the warmth and nourishment. The simple act of eating a meal in a place of unexpected kindness a profound experience. As he ate, he observed the church members, their faces radiating a quiet strength and unwavering faith. They were not just a congregation. They were a family, bound together by their shared beliefs and their commitment to serving others. He had underestimated them, dismissed them as a select group, but now he witnessed their genuine compassion and unwavering generosity. Throughout the evening, the church members engaged him in conversation, sharing stories of their lives and their work. They spoke of the challenges they faced, the struggles they overcame, and the unwavering hope that sustained them. There was no bitterness, no resentment, only a quiet dignity and a deep-seated faith. As he listened to their stories, Miller began to understand the depth of their commitment, the importance of their work, and the profound impact they had on the community. He had judged them based on stereotypes and prejudices, but now he saw them for who they truly were: compassionate, resilient, and deeply committed to serving those in need. The storm outside raged on, but within the walls of Grace Community Church, a different kind of storm was brewing, a storm of empathy, understanding, and unexpected grace. And at the center of it all was Councilman Miller, a man beginning to confront the consequences of his actions and the error of his judgments. The storm outside raged on, a relentless tempest that mirrored the turmoil within Councilman Richard Miller. He sat in the quiet sanctuary of Grace Community Church, surrounded by the warmth of the people he had so recently wronged. The kindness they had shown him, their unexpected hospitality, had begun to chip away at the hardened shell of prejudice he had cultivated over the years. He had always considered himself a man of action, a decisive leader who knew what was best for the community. He had justified his discriminatory actions against Grace Community Church by claiming it was in the best interests of the city, a thinly veiled excuse for his own ingrained biases. But the reality of his actions, the consequences of his prejudice, were now starkly clear. He had judged these people based on stereotypes and assumptions, failing to see the depth of their faith, the strength of their community, and the profound impact of their charitable work. He had allowed his own prejudices to cloud his judgment, blinding him to the truth. As he spent more time with the church members, listening to their stories, witnessing their unwavering commitment to serving others, he began to see the error of his ways. He heard tales of hardship and resilience, of unwavering faith in the face of adversity. He learned about their struggles, their triumphs, and the profound impact they had on the lives of countless individuals. He heard stories of single mothers struggling to feed their children, of elderly individuals facing eviction, of families devastated by illness and unemployment. He learned how the church had provided food, clothing, shelter, and emotional support to those in need, offering a beacon of hope in the darkness. He had dismissed their work as mere charity, a superficial act of goodwill. But now, he saw it as something far more profound, a testament to their faith, their compassion, and their unwavering commitment to their community. Their actions were not merely charitable. They were transformative, offering hope and healing to those who had lost their way. He began to question his own worldview, his own ingrained prejudices. He realized that his actions had not only harmed the church, but had also reflected poorly on the city as a whole. His decision to deny them funding had not been a wise act of leadership. It had been a cowardly act of discrimination. He saw himself in a new light, not as a powerful leader, but as a man who had allowed his biases to dictate his actions. He had been blinded by his own arrogance, his own sense of self-importance. The storm outside had stripped him of his power, his authority, his sense of self. But within the walls of Grace Community Church, he was beginning to find something far more valuable: a sense of humility, a newfound understanding, and a growing respect for the people he had so readily judged. His prejudices, once deeply entrenched, were beginning to crumble, replaced by a dawning awareness of his own failings and the profound impact of his actions. The night deepened, the storm outside continuing its relentless assault. Inside Grace Community Church, however, a different kind of storm was brewing, a storm of shared stories, of vulnerability, and of unexpected connection. Councilman Richard Miller, still wrapped in a borrowed blanket, sat among the church members, listening intently as they shared their experiences. Sister Martha, her voice filled with quiet strength, recounted her own struggles as a single mother, raising 3 children on a meager income. She spoke of the times when the church had provided food and clothing for her family, offering a lifeline during difficult times. Her story was not just a personal narrative. It was a testament to the church's unwavering commitment to its community. Brother Samuel, a veteran struggling with PTSD, shared his own experiences, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke of the isolation and despair he had faced. He described how the church had offered him a sense of belonging, a community where he felt accepted and understood. His story highlighted the importance of community support and the healing power of human connection. Elder Grace, her eyes twinkling with wisdom, shared stories from her long life, recounting the history of the church and its unwavering commitment to serving those in need. She spoke of the countless lives that had been touched by the church's charitable work, the generations who had benefited from its compassion and generosity. Her story was a testament to the enduring legacy of faith and service. Young Sarah, a bright-eyed teenager, spoke of her own volunteer work at the church, describing the joy she found in helping others. She spoke of the sense of purpose and fulfillment she derived from contributing to the community, a testament to the transformative power of service. Each story was unique, yet they were all interconnected, woven together by a common thread of faith, resilience, and unwavering commitment to serving others. As Miller listened, he began to understand the depth of their commitment, the importance of their work, and the profound impact they had on the lives of countless individuals. He had judged them based on their race, on their economic status, on their perceived differences. He had allowed his own prejudices to cloud his judgment, blinding him to the truth of their humanity. But now, as he listened to their stories, he began to see them as individuals, as people with their own unique experiences, their own struggles, their own triumphs. He saw their faith not as a weakness, but as a source of strength, a guiding light that illuminated their path through adversity. He saw their community not as a homogeneous group, but as a diverse tapestry of individuals, bound together by their shared beliefs and their commitment to serving others. He realized that his own prejudices had been a barrier, preventing him from seeing the truth, from understanding the profound impact of their work. He had allowed his own biases to dictate his actions, leading him to make a decision that had caused harm and injustice. But now, as he listened to their stories, he began to understand the error of his ways, the depth of his own prejudice, and the importance of empathy and understanding. The storm outside raged on, but within the walls of Grace Community Church, a different kind of storm was brewing. A storm of understanding, empathy, and unexpected connection. The storm outside had finally subsided, leaving behind a world washed clean, yet still bearing the scars of its fury. Inside Grace Community Church, a different kind of calm had settled, a quiet peace that followed the storm of shared stories. Councilman Richard Miller sat alone, the borrowed blanket still wrapped around him, his mind racing with the events of the past few hours. He had come seeking shelter from the storm, a desperate plea for refuge from the elements. But he had found something far more profound, a sanctuary for his soul, a place where his prejudices were challenged and his biases were laid bare. He reflected on his actions, his discriminatory decision to deny Grace Community Church the funding and permit for their annual charity fundraiser. He had justified his actions with flimsy excuses, hiding behind the veil of political expediency. But the truth was far more uncomfortable, far more revealing. His decision had been born out of prejudice, a deep-seated bias that had clouded his judgment and led him to make a profoundly unjust decision. The contrast between his own actions and the generosity of the church members was stark and unsettling. He had acted out of selfishness, out of a desire to maintain his own power and status. He had sought to control and suppress, to silence those who dared to challenge his authority. But the church members, in their quiet strength and unwavering faith, had shown him a different path, a path of compassion, of service, of unwavering commitment to their community. He had judged them based on their race, their economic status, their perceived differences. He had allowed his own prejudices to dictate his actions, blinding him to the truth of their humanity. But now, he saw them for who they truly were, compassionate, resilient, and deeply committed to serving others. A wave of shame washed over him, a profound sense of regret settling in his heart. He had not only wronged the church, but had also betrayed the trust of the community he had sworn to serve. He had allowed his own biases to dictate his actions, leading him to make a decision that had caused harm and injustice. He thought of the faces of the church members, their quiet dignity, their unwavering faith. He thought of their stories, their struggles, their triumphs. He thought of the countless lives they had touched, the hope they had kindled in the hearts of those in need. He had underestimated them, dismissed them, judged them. But now, he saw them as beacons of light, shining brightly in the darkness, offering hope and healing to those who had lost their way. He had been blinded by his own arrogance, his own sense of self-importance. But the storm had stripped him bare, exposing his vulnerability and his profound error in judgment. The revelation was not just an intellectual understanding. It was a visceral experience, a profound shift in his perspective. He had come seeking shelter from the storm, but he had found something far greater, a chance at redemption, a path towards a better understanding of himself and the community he served. The storm outside had passed, but the storm within him raged on, a tempest of self-reflection, remorse, and a growing sense of hope for a new beginning. The morning light, filtered through the stained glass windows of Grace Community Church, cast a warm glow on Councilman Richard Miller as he approached Reverend Jackson. He stood before the Reverend, his posture humble, his demeanor a stark contrast to the arrogant self-assurance he had displayed just days earlier. The weight of his past actions pressed heavily upon him, a burden he could no longer bear alone. He had spent the night wrestling with his conscience, grappling with the implications of his discriminatory actions. The stories he had heard, the kindness he had received, had shaken him to his core, forcing him to confront the depth of his own prejudice and the error of his judgment. He had come to realize that his decision to deny the church funding had not been an act of political expediency. It had been an act of blatant discrimination, fueled by his own ingrained biases. He cleared his throat, his voice trembling slightly. "Reverend Jackson," he began, his words halting and uncertain. I need to apologize." Reverend Jackson listened patiently, his expression calm and unwavering. He had witnessed the transformation in Miller, the shift from arrogance to humility. He understood that Miller's apology was not just a formality. It was a genuine expression of remorse. "Councilman Miller," Reverend Jackson replied, his voice gentle but firm, "your actions caused pain and disappointment within our community. But we also believe in the power of redemption." Miller continued, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "My decision to deny your permit and funding was wrong. It was fueled by prejudice, by my own ingrained biases. I allowed my personal feelings to cloud my judgment, and I acted in a way that was unjust and discriminatory. I am truly sorry for the hurt I have caused." He paused, his eyes welling up with tears. The weight of his confession, the burden of his guilt, was almost unbearable. He had never before expressed such vulnerability, such a profound sense of regret. "I understand," Reverend Jackson replied, his voice filled with compassion. "But an apology is not enough. You need to make amends." Miller nodded, his resolve firming. "I want to reverse my decision. I want to approve the permit and funding for your charity fundraiser. I want to support your work to help you make Hope Blooms a success." Reverend Jackson smiled, a gentle, understanding smile that eased the tension in the room. "That would be a significant step towards making amends," he replied. "It would show that you are truly committed to making things right." Miller immediately contacted the city council, reversing his previous decision. He approved the permit and funding for Hope Blooms. His actions met with a mixture of surprise and relief. The news spread rapidly, generating a wave of positive reactions throughout the community. The man who had once sought to silence the church was now actively supporting its efforts. His transformation was not just a personal journey. It was a testament to the power of compassion, the importance of empathy, and the possibility of redemption. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean, and a community united in its commitment to hope and healing. The annual Hope Blooms charity fundraiser was a resounding success. The community rallied around Grace Community Church, demonstrating an outpouring of support that far exceeded expectations. The event was not just a celebration of the church's work. It was a testament to the power of community, the resilience of the human spirit, and the transformative impact of a single act of redemption. At the center of it all was Councilman Richard Miller, a changed man. He had not only approved the funding and permit for the event, but had also become a vocal supporter of Grace Community Church and its work. His transformation was complete, a testament to the power of compassion, the importance of empathy, and the possibility of redemption. He used his influence to advocate for social justice initiatives, leveraging his position on the city council to support programs that benefited the less fortunate. He championed policies that addressed issues of poverty, hunger, and inequality, demonstrating a genuine commitment to serving the community. His transformation was not just a personal journey. It was a catalyst for change within the city. His newfound commitment to social justice inspired others to follow suit, creating a ripple effect of positive change. The city council, once a bastion of political maneuvering and self-interest, began to prioritize community needs, reflecting Miller's newfound dedication to social justice. He became a regular attendee at Grace Community Church services, his presence a symbol of his commitment to the community. He actively participated in the church's charitable work, volunteering his time and resources to help those in need. He became a mentor to young people, sharing his own experiences and guiding them towards a path of service and compassion. His relationship with Reverend Jackson deepened, evolving from one of conflict to one of mutual respect and collaboration. They worked together to address issues of inequality and injustice within the community, their partnership a testament to the power of forgiveness and reconciliation. Miller's transformation was not without its challenges. Some members of the community remained skeptical, questioning the sincerity of his change. Others continued to hold on to past grievances, finding it difficult to forgive his past actions. But Miller persevered, demonstrating his commitment to social justice through consistent action and unwavering dedication. His story became a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of redemption. It demonstrated that even the most deeply entrenched prejudices could be overcome, that even the most hardened hearts could be changed. His transformation inspired others to confront their own biases, to challenge their own assumptions, and to strive for a more just and equitable society. The storm had passed, leaving behind a community transformed, united in its commitment to hope, healing, and a shared future built on the principles of compassion, understanding, and unwavering faith. The once divided community now stood together, a testament to the power of unexpected alliances and the enduring strength of the human spirit.